All right, welcome everybody to the late night edition of the Bishop's Barbecue. Listen, if you didn't catch the earlier edition, go on back and check out the video. And I also advise you to check out the one from the week before with Bishop Rudolph McKissick and Dr. Freddie Haynes. Man, that was off the chain. Now, what I need y'all to do right here, right now, I need y'all to share. I need you to like. I need you to comment, all of that kind of stuff. Rep your city, rep your town. Let me know where you're coming in from. Listen, this is going to be a thought-provoking conversation with one of the brilliant minds of our day. And I'm so happy that, I was finally able to get this brother to come on. I followed his career. I followed his social activism for so long. You know him. We all know him. Talib Kweli is a American rapper, entrepreneur, activist. He's gained recognition in the music industry, but also for being a humanitarian and an activist. I don't want to read his bio. I want him to speak to you for himself on tonight. And I'm just so happy to have the opportunity, and I feel blessed just to be able to have him here. So help me welcome Mr. Talib Kweli.
Hey, what's good, brother?
How you feeling, man?
Good. How you doing, Bishop?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to have you on here, bro.
You too. I was. It took me a minute. I don't have to figure out how to get on. I don't have Firefox.
Oh, I got you. I got you.
Well, I'm here. I'm here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Glad to have you here. So, look, man. First, I want to I want people to know. I know so many know who you are, but for those who don't, tell them a little bit about yourself. I know that you're from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when you were with the group Black Star and running with Mos Def and Kanye and all of that stuff. But tell them how you came up in the music industry and a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm the son of Perry and Brenda Green, both professors. So I was raised. I had the incredible privilege of being raised by educators in Brooklyn, New York. And growing up in New York, I also had the privilege of getting involved in hip hop early. I wasn't into hip hop when I was a little kid because I was more like a nerd. I was more, collecting insects and reading and writing poetry and plays. But when I started liking girls, I got in junior high school. Hip hop took over. And the hip hop, another way I was blessed is that when I first started listening to hip hop, when I was in junior high school, it was the late 80s. And the popular hip hop in the streets, in the club, on the radio was all conscious hip hop. So my parents were, Black activists when they were in their college days. And just having all that sort of Black cultural nationalism in my house married with the hip hop that was popular at the time, it created this perfect storm to whereas hip hop really became my life. So I'm born Black. I'm proud to be born Black because I'm proud of how I'm proud to be born part of a group of people that had to go through the struggle that we go through. But my chosen tribe is artist, and so I chose to be a hip hop artist, and that's sort of been my defining characteristic, and it's helped me tremendously through life.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about in terms of your, being one of the conscious rappers out there in an industry where it's so easy to get caught up in going a different way in hip hop and going a little more commercial and doing what needs to be done. To go so far, so many people decide to go another way. And I was going to ask you, why did you decide to do the conscious route? And obviously, the home you came up in and the way you were raised had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I credit my parents and my environment. I credit Brooklyn, New York, because of the community I came out of in New York. I know from traveling the world that I come out of a special community, and I know I was blessed. And not everybody is blessed to grow up in such a diverse, pro-Black community. But also, just for all the artists paying attention, it's also very rewarding in the long run. If you're just out here trying to get that short paper, then yeah, you can make a hit record. I mean, I'm very talented. I'm talented enough to make a hit record. I could write, a debaucherous record or a record that if I just wanted to get on the clubs, get into the clubs or get into the radio, I can do that. But I find that the music that stands the test of time is the music that is conscious. When we think about art from back in the days, when we think about the biggest artists from back in the days, there are plenty of hit records and trendy records from artists that we don't think about anymore. But when we think about music that stands the test of time, we talk about Nina Simone and Marvin Gaye and Bob Marley and artists who really spoke about what was going on with the time. So just on the financial sense, in the long run, it makes sense to be a conscious artist.
Yeah. I went to college back in the 80s, and back then, I was listening to Public Enemy and so many of those that were speaking the language of the day. I was on campus fighting against the university being invested in South Africa and other things, and that kind of music just kind of really spoke to the times and fueled a certain level of energy with those of us that were out there in the trenches in this type of activism. And I know that there's got to be those who have told you that your music has inspired them in that way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my parents absolutely were involved in anti-apartheid activism. That the anti-apartheid activism, as far as the situation in South Africa, that's sort of the first real tangible activism that I saw in my lifetime. My parents would be very supportive of Bishop Desmond Tutu and were very vocal in their community about the jailing of Nelson Mandela. And then to be in Brooklyn, in New York in 1990, when Mandela got out, and to see that he spent all those years, he was labeled a terrorist. He spent all those years, 27 years locked up, Robbins Island. Then he got out and came to New York as a hero. That was a defining moment for me, that it's not all lost, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. When I was able to, I didn't see Mandela in Yankee Stadium, but I remember what the vibe was like in the city at the time. And I'm just blessed with the household that I grew up in.
So what in the midst of a career as an artist and the inroads that you were making in that field, how did you decide that you were going to take time and focus on activism and other things? Because most people kind of get caught up. Listen, my career right now, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm focused. I don't have time for that other stuff. What in you made you say, hey, you know what? I'm doing this career thing, but I've got to be engaged in some other things as well.
Well, for me personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, there is no separation. My art is me. The career is a byproduct of it. But we all have partners in our life. I can't have a partner who's not a fan of my music, because if you're not a fan of my music, you're not a fan of me as a man. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I say that to say music is subjective. There are people who may not like my music stylistically. They may not like my voice. They may not like my beat selection. They may not like my lyrics or whatever, this and that. And that's fine. And that doesn't bother me. But that's not someone who I can be a life partner with, right? So I'm just talking about how my music is connected to me. And this goes for the activism. I speak about social justice in my music because I don't have any other choice. I don't know what else to do. Like, and so it's one and the same. And to be honest with you, excuse me, I participated in activism from the time I was a teenager, but I wouldn't have called myself an activist until maybe 2012, 2013. Now, I was seen as an activist rapper or a conscious rapper, whatever that means, beforehand, because my music was always conscious. I always would show up at events. My music was always the voice of the struggle. But I always let the actual activists take the lead. When I first started in my career, I went to Cuba, I went to South Africa with the Malcolm X grassroots movement and the wonderful brothers and sisters from that organization. But even though I was on those trips, I didn't know what they knew. You know, they introduced me to Assad Shakur. They took me to Winnie Mandela's house, but I'm learning from them. When I released an album in 2012 or maybe 2013 called Prisoner of Conscience, I felt a way about releasing an album called Prisoner of Conscience and not paying my respect to actual prisoners of conscience. So I started becoming more directly involved in that type and speaking up for political prisoners. I've done that my whole career, but now I went to go see Mumia instead of just talking to Mumia. Now I went to see Harry Belafonte and sit with him, and Harry Belafonte put me in touch with the Dream Defenders. And I went to Tallahassee and I slept over in the Capitol with Phil Agnew, and I met Bree Newsom, who took the Confederate flag down. You know, I met her when she was just starting in the activist space. And then that led me to going to Ferguson. So, you know, naming my album Prisoner of Conscience, and I was already seen as a conscious artist and an activist artist, but that made me take the next step to actively be there on the ground whenever I could. And then I started getting involved in fundraising, and then I tried to protest Trump. I went and sat outside the White House for a week. That was you know, I went all in. So now I'm trying to find the balance a little bit more, but I do understand why artists don't do it. Now that I've invested more time into more of a full-on direct action on the ground activist, I totally see why artists don't do it. It's tough work. It's hard to do because you become tethered to everything that you stand for. And then if you just try, like you said, if you just try to have a career, if you're just trying to just sometimes just chill, you can't, because you're always tethered to whatever cause you stood up for.
Or if you deviate in any way, shape, or form, seemingly from that vein, then you've got every finger pointing at you.
Right.
So I'm gonna throw out some terms and tell me exactly what they mean to you. Racism in America.
Racism in America is the fuel that lights the fire under America. America cannot survive without racism. It is built on racism. And that's why, in order for racism to even be confronted a little bit, people begin to start burning stuff down. You see these riots and the social uprising, and I've seen more changes, direct, tangible changes from the uprisings and the riots that happened after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor than I've seen in years of voting. And that's because of the racism in America is baked into the system.
What do you say to those that talk about the uprising and they talk about looting, burning buildings, etc.? Never talked about the systemic racism and the events that catalyzed the response to it, but spoke in condemnation of those types of actions. What would be your message to them?
I mean, the quickest, most efficient way is to just quote Dr. King, because they like to whitewash his legacy. And when I quote Dr. King, I don't mean the like Black History Month McDonald's commercial Dr. King. I mean the revolutionary Dr. King. And, you know, to paraphrase, everybody knows that he said a riot is a language of the unheard. But before he said that, he said, I cannot condemn a riot without condemning the conditions that caused this. And that's just the most efficient way to put it. You know, and again, what I'm seeing right now, Breonna Taylor's officers who murdered her would not be arrested. They would not be arrested if there was no riot. The NFL would not be apologizing and saying Black Lives Matter if there was no riot. Billionaire Bob Johnson would not be saying, you know what, maybe it's time for reparations if it wasn't for these riots. You know, the Minnesota City Council, Minneapolis City Council is really, really talking seriously about defunding the police. Defunding the police went from the fringe to the mainstream within a week. Not from anything but the people just standing up and saying, not from anything but that righteous anger.
Wow. You know, and I hold one of the other quotes that Dr. King made. He said, I can no longer condemn the black men in the ghetto throwing Molotov cocktails without condemning the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. And that's the Dr. King that people don't quote, they don't want to talk about. What comes to mind when I say Donald Trump?
Well, I'm from New York, and I'm in the hip hop space. A lot of times, hip hop is people criticize it because they say, especially the rappers in New York, we're using Donald Trump as a symbol of wealth and opulence and as something that you wanted to attain. So Donald Trump's name found its way into a lot of rap songs. And I just recently on my podcast, People's Party, interviewed Method Man. And he is a rapper that is often weaponized because he has a skit on his album To Cow 2000 where Donald Trump is on his album doing a skit. And he says, I never met Donald Trump. Donald Trump was just a dude who was on the party scene. He was a friend of Russell Simmons at the time. Russell has since come out and denounced him. But he was like, Donald Trump is stupid. You know, Donald Trump to me is a poor man's idea of what a rich man looks like. And I say poor man, not a broke man, because poor is a mentality. Like if you black, it's a good chance you broke. So I don't want to be elitist and shame people for not having money, but you can be broke and rich in spirit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like when I say a poor man, I'm not talking about what's in your pocket. I'm talking about what's in your spirit and what's in your soul. And you know, Donald Trump's political aspirations started, you know, his father was in the KKK. Yeah. People try to challenge that fact. People try to say, well, you don't have any proof that he was in the KKK just because he was arrested at a KKK rally in Queens in 1927 or something like that. But brother, you know, if you're a white man at a KKK rally and
come on, man,
what else? What other reason would you there? You know
listen, if you arrest me in the crack house, it's highly likely I'm doing something in there.
That's right. Yeah. So here's a billionaire son of a Klansman who failed up, who has been isolated, has never had to deal with the people in any way. And if you're the billionaire son of a Klansman, then the world that you were promised was that you could always look down on black people, that no black man would ever be better than you. And here comes Barack Hussein Obama, who's smarter, like to quote my good brother Don Lemon, who's smarter than you. What Don Lemon say? Wife look better than you. Punch you on the birth certificate thing. Right. Everything you try to come at him with, he bested you on. And so what did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump went on Fox News just about once a week talking about Obama was born in Kenya. That is his political claim to fame. So he entered the political arena saying Obama, the first black president, was born in Kenya. He started his campaign by saying Mexicans are rapists. Last Sunday, he retweeted a neo-Nazi saying white power. And this is something I want to say on your show that I think people miss. When Donald Trump was running, Donald Trump, I'm just going to go ahead and say it at this point. Donald Trump is a Nazi. You know, I used to try to curb myself because I didn't want to be hyperbolic and I didn't want to take away from the seriousness of what a Nazi actually is. But when you have a man who's retweeting white power, right? When you have a man who says that when the Nazis killed Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, that there's good people on all sides. When he hired Sebastian Gorka and Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, all Nazis, to his cabinet, when he was running for president in 2016, he retweeted neo-Nazi accounts 75 times. And no one cared about it because at that point, the scuttlebutt was, well, he can't win anyway, you know? And because people were dismissive of his campaign chances, that was the excuse. And because it was online, and you and me met online, you know, so a lot of people are dismissive of online racism because that's just trolling. It's online, it's not real. So people looked at Trump like, oh, it's online, it's not real. Trump proved those people wrong. Trump understood. One thing I could say is that The racists and the Nazis and the white supremacists that were behind Trump understood the online landscape better than the progressives and the liberals.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. They understood its power, and they harnessed its power, which is what really brought about the success of his campaign. All of the stuff around Facebook and his campaigns and all that kind of stuff, Trump and them really harnessed that, and I think many underestimated its power.
Right.
So what do you say about the folks that everything that you just named? I mean, all of the folks, the Nazis that are around him, and yet you still have folks who are in this space of denial that are saying, prove to me he's a racist. What? Name something racist he's done. And I mean, the list is unending. What do you do with those folks? And I mean, I see you battling these folks, every single day. And to me, I think he's a dangerous cult leader because there's no logic, there's no rhyme or reason to the things that his followers believe, in spite of all the evidence that's in their face.
Right. So, I mentioned earlier, I started this show talking about how privileged I was, and I do not take my privilege for granted. I am born into an academic family that afforded me the privilege to just have a lot of book knowledge. And so I try to apply it as practically as I can. That's the privilege I was born with. The privilege I've earned is the celebrity privilege and the class privilege from being good at my craft and making enough money to be able to, at my leisure, hop on Twitter and spend as many hours as I want to spend on there. I'm very good at time management, if I do say so myself. And I truly enjoy it. I enjoy the debate. I enjoy the challenge. I run to the challenges. But I understand that most people in the world, especially working class people, especially Black people, do not have the resources, time, or even the wherewithal to be going at it in the way that I do. And so racism is not logical. Like if you like a young lady or a woman and you are courting her and she says no, the logical thing is to step back. If you would and ignore and just leave her alone. If you leave racism alone and you step back from it, it grows, it festers. It's like a sore. It's like a cold. If you get a cold, you don't just let me just ignore it and hope it'll go away. It's just trolling. Nah, you attack it. You don't just attack the symptoms. You attack the root of that illness. And so the pro-Blackness that I was raised on is if you see it, you say something about it.
Right.
I cannot see bigotry and just let it pass by me. Now, you have to pick your battles. For some people, spending a lot of time is too toxic. And I get that too. But not for me. Combating racism is my self-care. For me, it would be toxic for me to not say nothing. For me, if I saw all this going on and I didn't say nothing, that would eat me up inside. You know what I'm saying?
It's almost like a catharsis for you.
Yes. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And I understand that every hour, every second that I spend combating a racist lie is a time taken away from them harassing someone else who doesn't have the platform that I have.
Yeah.
That's the way I
Yeah. So what comes to mind when I say voting?
Okay. So voting is something that I've evolved on. As a Black man in America, I don't judge people who don't want to vote. I don't judge people who are disheartened by the system because I used to be one of those people. I would list what I still consider valid reasons to not vote. The two-party system is flawed. There's too much money in politics. It's absolutely true that the Democrats have taken the Black vote for granted. It's absolutely true that the Republican Party runs with Nazis. So there's plenty of reasons that you can give for not voting. But then I read about how Brother Malcolm X, the ballot and the bullet, how Brother Malcolm X grew and evolved and began working with politicians, particularly Adam Clayton Powell, to get the Black community to vote in blocks and to see the vote as a tool, to see it as a weapon in our fight against white supremacy. So while I don't judge nobody who doesn't vote, I have reversed and changed my stance on voting, and now I vote when I can. I do understand that voting in local elections is far more effective for your community than presidential elections. But I also will say, if you're one of these people who doesn't vote, you better be doing a lot of activist work. If you're going to tell me you don't vote, you better show me what it is you do. Because if you don't vote and all you do is complain about voting, then you are a huge part of the problem.
So you don't take issue with those who say, listen, because I completely understand their vantage point, who are saying, listen, we're not voting with the Republicans, but then at the same time, the Democrats continue to take us for granted. And their claim to fame is we're not the Republicans, so vote for us. And so there's this movement out there that's saying, you don't give us anything tangible, you don't give us anything that we want, then we're not voting for you at all. So what's your critique on that group?
Obviously, there are insidious factions that come out and try to split the black vote. And obviously there are insidious factions, white supremacist factions, that take that energy and weaponize it against the black community. But what you just said, on the surface, that's a completely valid critique. That's an absolute valid critique. My personal belief is the math doesn't add up on that, because if you're a progressive person, then you understand, if you're a true activist and truly a progressive person, then you understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and that the job is not to get everything right now. And if I don't get what I want right now, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. The job is to continue to in increments, as much as you can, keep pushing the country, the world, in a more progressive direction. The current system we have right now, this is what people don't understand. The job of the United States president is to be top cop. The job of the United States president is to be an imperialist. If you thought that Obama was going to come in and not drop bombs, then you're not even paying attention. You know what I'm saying? If you think that Bernie Sanders, for the progressive Bernie Sanders fans, if you think that if Bernie Sanders got the nomination, you think Bernie Sanders wasn't going to drop no bombs? Bernie Sanders was going to drop them bombs too. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the job of the American president. The whole Kamala Harris is a pariah. Kamala Harris is a lightning rod for controversy. The black community, particularly in the Bay Area, has a lot of valid criticism about Kamala Harris because of her stance as a DA. And we don't rock with the cops like that. The whole Kamala is a cop thing, it's not inaccurate to say that Kamala is a cop. But if the reason why you're not going to vote for Kamala Harris, the reason why you're not going to support Kamala Harris is because she's a cop, you're like, well, she's a cop, so I'm not voting for her for president. Well, what office do you think she's running for? She's running to top cop. If you support Bernie Sanders, you support his desire to be the top cop. So I think people need to be honest about what game we playing. Are you working within the system, or are you working outside of the system?
Yeah,
from tweeting from the iPhones about how they're going to chop the heads off the rich and kill the 1%, and how that's very hypocritical.
Well, there's a level of intellectual dishonesty in that, and of course we know that that Trump is a symptom of a greater problem of white supremacy and racism in America. But then at the same time, we're once again in this space of choosing Satan over Lucifer, because if you're intellectually honest, you've got to admit there's some problems, even with Joe Biden. I mean, this is the architect of modern mass incarceration. This is a guy who over and over and over again has opposed civil rights, has boasted about his tough on crime stance, and has done things that have been extremely detrimental to the black community. So in order to support him, there's a level of hypocrisy that goes with being for one form of bigotry, but against another. Right.
Well, I think this is where tactics come into play. You have to decide what game you're going to play. Like, are you going to participate in the system? Or are you going to not participate in the system? And we have to talk about that in that paradigm. So let's take it off let's take the I'm not voting, I'm not participating in the system at all. Well, then that means you're not paying taxes, you're not doing none of that. You're going to just be a Moor. You know what I'm saying? Like, Go get your Morris credentials and do that. But if you're looking at the choices that we have in front of us, here's the facts of the matter. The Democratic Party has room in its tent for progressives, for establishment Democrats, for conservative Democrats, all these. You got the far left, Bernie Sanders, Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman type of people who are welcome in the Democratic Party, and you have the more establishment conservative Democrats who like the Joe Bidens and the Nancy Pelosi's and people like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's one choice. You have a choice of a tent that has that, and then the other choice is a tent that's Nazis and white supremacists, right? So okay, those are the two choices. Now, if you're going to talk about dismantling electoral politics, show me the petition. I'll sign the petition. Show me the march where we taking money out of politics. Show me the work you're doing outside before and after election day to take money out of politics. Show me the work you're doing to raise up out of the communities a viable third party candidate, viable fifth party candidate. And if you can't show me that work, then I don't want to hear your complaints about the two party system. If you're not showing me the work, you know what I'm saying?
Because otherwise we're stuck with the duopoly, and it's either jump out of politics or you got to be involved in some kind of way with the current system that exists.
Right. I'm gonna give you an example. So Barack Obama, when he won, he was anti-gay marriage, and I believe that he was anti-gay marriage because of his faith and because it was at that time when he won, it was politically sound to be anti-gay marriage.
Right.
Halfway through his first term, the vibe of the country changed and the country became more tolerant. And Obama, being a smart politician, I don't know if Obama in his heart of hearts believes in gay marriage. But as a politician, he said, you know what? I'm pro-gay marriage now. Because he was pushed further to the left. He was pushed more progressively because the country, the people, the electorate, our job is to push the politicians, right? Within the Democrats, and even somebody like Joe Biden, you have the opportunity to push someone in that direction. With the Republicans, there is no opportunity. Joe Biden has on his platform right now, if you read his platform, he says he supports the study for reparations. Now, the study for reparations is called HR 40. He doesn't go as far to say that he supports HR 40. To me, it's a cowardly stance. I support the study of reparation. It's a cowardly stance. But I'd rather, if you give me two choices to vote for, I'd rather vote for the guy who says, hey, let's look at this reparations thing, than the guy says, I'm not with reparations. Feel like I have. Go ahead.
I'm glad you went there. You must be a prophet, because that's the next word I was going to throw out there to you was reparations.
But before we get into it, I just wanted with the crime bill. Okay. Joe Biden is absolutely responsible for the 94 crime bill. He has apologized for it, so we have to be honest. He has apologized for it. Whether or not, we don't have to accept his apology, though, and his apology is not really worth anything other than the political pandering. But if we're going to state that he's responsible for it, we have to state that, because you as a Christian, if people want to repent, we have to forgive them, right? There is no forgiveness without repentance, right? Now, whether or not he's going to repent, that remains to be seen. But Bill Clinton is also responsible for that. Hillary Clinton is also responsible for that. But you know what? Bernie Sanders the Black Caucus was the NAACP. The people, I don't expect old white people to know what's right for our community. So to me, I put the onus on the Black Caucus, on the NAACP of that time, because old white people who are trying to pander to Black people are going to look to the NAACP and the Black Caucus and say, what we should do. And the Black Caucus said, hey man, there's too much black on black crime. We got to clean up our streets. We got too many super predators out here. Even in hip hop, we were doing self-destruction. As a rapper, people say, let's do self-destruction over. Self-destruction was a great record, but the name of the record is Self-Destruction. That record was about black on black crime, because the politic at that time wasn't let's stop white supremacy. The politic in the black was let's stop black on black crime. So the politicians were following our lead on that. Right,
absolutely, and there are some who have come out from the caucus. Bobby Rush comes to mind, who said it was the worst decision he ever made. And so there are some who look back regrettably on that. And of course, people will use the Black Caucus's support for that bill to justify Joe Biden and Bernie's vote. Because when you criticize them, they'll come back and say, "Well, hell, hold up now. The Black Caucus was down with that, so you can't blame Biden for that."
Biden take the blame. He has to.
Yeah.
He has to stand next to that. On that.
Yeah. So reparations. Biden said, I'm down with the study. Many of them, when the Democratic primary was going in full swing and you had a bunch of folks in the race, the conversation was going on about reparations. We don't hear about it now. And most of them all said they support the HR 40, the study.
Except for Biden. Biden didn't say Biden's support is new. That's why I don't really trust it. You know
right. And matter of fact, even Bernie wasn't down with reparations for all those progressives. Bernie was
actively against reparations up until last year, and he got with Cory Booker and brother Mark Thompson got at him. You're right. He spoke out against reparations, and then he reversed that stance a year ago.
But are we beyond a study at this point? What's your take on the whole push for reparations?
So, I mean, as far as the politic of it, I got to say, brother, I manage my expectations. I don't expect the government to take the lead on reparations. You can have all the studies you want. There is no congressional commission. Without a congressional commission, even if this HR 40 became a real thing, the next step is the congressional commission, which we don't have yet. I support HR 40. I support a push for it. I support a push for a congressional commission. It's at this point, me knowing the history of this country, it sounds pie in the sky for me. I don't expect a white supremacist government to give us that. I support the push for it, but I'm not waiting on it. I'm not out here waiting on it. I support Black economics as well. For us to put all our eggs in that basket, and for us to hold our votes. For us to say, if you don't give me reparations by next year this time, then I'm not voting for you. That's just stupid. That's just because they have all the chips. You know what I'm saying? Like your vote has to be a vote. They say voting is an exchange. Well, if you say, if you don't give me what I want, I'm not going to vote. What are you exchanging? That's the dumbest negotiation ever. You know what I'm saying? In a negotiation, we have to be honest with each other. I don't expect the government to be honest. You know what's going to get us closer to reparations? I'm an anti-violent person. I'm anti-violence, but I'm pro-karma. And what I think is going to get us closer to reparations is what I said earlier. Bob Johnson didn't come out for reparations until these uprisings happened. When people realize that Black people ain't going to take it, when we start getting on our Black version of the Boston Tea Party, that's when it's like I give you an example with the 40 acres and a mule. The 40 acres and a mule, General Tecumseh, the North was losing at one point, and they were like, "Look, if you are a slave and you come and fight for the North, we're gonna give you 40 acres and a mule." It took the country to be divided and on fire in a war for them to be like, okay, look, for them to throw up their hands. Okay, look, what do y'all want? And I fear that that's us waiting for the Black Caucus, waiting for the Congress to push through reparations. And I want, for context, in the year my first record 2,000 seasons ever, I rap about reparations. On the Kanye West song in 2004, We Can Make It Better, I rap about reparations. Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, the organization that gives me my political education, that's a pro-reparations organization. I defy anyone to find a rapper that has been more supportive of reparations than myself. I've worked with NCOBRA, I've worked with NARC, doing events. I've been working with pro-reparations organizations my whole life, but I do not expect no white man or the government is 86% white male. I don't expect them to take the lead on it. It needs to be some drastic action.
So that there's been this conversation and this division within the Black community about the whole issue of reparations. There's a certain group that has come after you and me, ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, who have faced fierce criticism and I think rightfully so, but really alienated themselves by coming after Black people who are actually in support of reparations. What is with this this division in the Black community where folk are more concerned about getting credit for something than the actual fight for justice, and where they're coming after other Black people to push some other type of agenda?
Well, I'm definitely down with Malcolm when Malcolm says, you don't air your dirty laundry. And I am someone who, there are a lot of, look, brother, you and me don't agree on everything. You know what I'm saying? You and me have private conversations. You and me don't agree on on a bunch of stuff. But what's more important is what we do agree on. And so I can work with you, and I could work with Black Lives Matter, and sometimes I could even work with the Nation of Islam. But sometimes I could work with, there's a lot of factions in the Black community that I don't completely align with. But if you're down for the liberation of Black people, we could find some common ground. Yeah, I'm down to work with you. But this ADOS group is not part of the movement for the liberation of Black people at all. And I'm not talking about the trolls. I'm not talking about their followers or the white boys in digital blackface to make up their ranks on Twitter. That's not when I talk about they're not pro-Black. Those people are obviously not pro-Black. But I'm talking about the leadership of ADOS. Antonio Moore is one of the founders of ADOS. ADOS' favorite line is Kamala's a cop. They say Kamala Harris is a cop because she was a DA. Do you know what Antonio Moore did before he was running ADOS?
Must have been a DA.
He was a DA in Los Angeles. So if Kamala's a cop, then Antonio Moore's a cop. You feel me? So Yvette Carnell is the co-founder. In 2016, when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote an excellent essay in the Atlantic on reparations, and he spoke in Congress last year. At that point, she was a Democrat who was working for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and she wrote a hit piece saying that Ta-Nehisi Coates doesn't know what he's talking about. When Bernie didn't get the nomination in 2016, if you go back to Yvette Carnell's tweets from back then, she evolved into a Trump supporter. She started talking about Trump looks so good on TV. She started really bigging up Trump. That's where you get the picture of her with the MAGA hat. That's where she started draping herself in the American flag. And she's also a board member of PFIR. PFIR stands for Progressives for Immigration Reform. They are not progressive. You know how the Nazis say they're National Socialists, but they're not really socialists? PFIR is not really progressive at all. It's founded by John Tanton. John Tanton is a white nationalist eugenist. If you're a white nationalist who believes in eugenics, you are a Nazi. This man has founded a bunch of anti-immigration organizations, FAIR and PFIR is the most prominent ones, because the goal of his organization is to get so-called progressives to work with him to stop immigration. He wants to stop particularly Black and brown immigration. Yvette Carnell, she's an actual Black American person, but she's very, very, very anti-immigrant. And when you're as anti-immigrant as Yvette Carnell is and as Antonio Moore is, you're going to intersect and overlap with white supremacy, whether you know that you're doing it or not. I truly believe that these are stupid people. I believe that what they are good at is YouTube. They're very good at YouTube. They're very good at watching a video, click like for subscribe, putting up the algorithms of YouTube. They're very good at that. But if you're on a board for a white nationalists, and white nationalists are Nazis organization, then no matter what you say out your mouth, I can't trust. If you go on ADOS.com, ADOS101.com, that website used to support Ronald Reagan. It said Ronald Reagan is better for Black people than Barack Obama is. I talked about it publicly. A couple of days after I talked about it publicly, they deleted Ronald Reagan's name from the website. I still got the screenshots. Right now on their website, they list verbatim Trump's campaign promise where he said, Black people are so poor, what do you have to lose by voting for me?
You have to lose, right.
Now, if you're a pro-reparations organization, and Antonio Moore, he invited Donald Trump to the ADOS conference because Tariq Nasheed used to be down with ADOS until he saw that they were grifters. And then he removed himself from the ADOS circle, but he started putting out the text messages between him and Antonio Moore, where Antonio Moore was telling him, we're going to invite Trump to the conference. So you bigging Trump up on your website. You invite Trump to your conference, but you claim you pro reparations. Donald Trump is anti-reparations. You say on your website that Black immigrants should be barred from receiving affirmative action. But then you say you're not anti-immigrant, even though Yvette Carnell works as a board member for an anti-immigrant organization. It's a complete grift. And anyone who supports them, I got a personal beef with, because they come from my family. And I'm not talking about the trolls. I'm talking about Antonia Moore, Yvette Carnell. They started telling lies about my mother. They started telling lies about my brother. And you could talk your mess about me all you want, but when you come from my family, it becomes personal. I got a personal problem with Yvette Carnell and Antonia Moore. And anyone who says, and at this point, anyone coming up to me who says ADOS to my face, we are going to have a problem. I'm not a violent person, but there's going to be a problem with that because you don't come from my family.
Well, you know, and the same thing, this whole personal attack on people. They tried to pull that with me. They tried to pull some old records or something and post them online and all of that. And you know, my thing is, we can have a philosophical, a political, or even a theological difference of opinion, but it doesn't go down the line of getting personal. I'm not trying to go after your family. I'm not trying to go after your livelihood. I'm not trying to do any of that. I mean, you and I have had disagreements. What have we done? We got on the telephone and said, hey, man, you know, this is what it is. And so I can't support any group that grifts off into personally attacking Black people, because you can't tell me that you're pro-Black while you're trying to destroy Black people.
That's right. That's right. I don't know anything about Antonia Moore's family. I don't know anything about Yvette Carnell's family. I don't know what their family names is. Yvette Carnell be posting up photographs. She posted up a photograph. My brother went to Yale. He played on the softball team or the baseball team. She posted up a photograph of him on the baseball team talking about just making fun of my brother, making fun of, you know, like making fun of my mom. My mother, Dr. Brenda Green from Medgar Evers College, PhD. You gonna come from my mom's, bro? Like, nah, like that's the part I can't even. Yeah, I don't. And that to me shows me that it's not about the work for them. It's about the clout, you know. And their whole grift right now is with the HR 40 thing is HR 40 and that bill is not relevant because it doesn't call Black people ADOS. I'm a Black American. My entire family was born in America. My family was kidnapped from Africa, and that's the other thing. They hate on Africans. How you gonna separate yourself from Africa but say I want reparations? The only reason we deserve reparations is because of our connection to Africa, right? So I am a descendant of enslaved people. And to me, there's a huge difference because my ancestors didn't consider themselves slaves. If my ancestors considered themselves slaves, just because some white man said the legal definition for you is a slave, then they would still be slaves. The reason that we are in the position to even talk how we talk right now, because our ancestors said, hell no, we not slaves. And they fought to change that.
But then the other thing is they're trying to come up with these stipulations that in order for you to qualify for reparations, that you would have to be able to go back and find some level of documentation that your family was on the plantation some kind of way, records that many Black folk who descended from enslaved Africans do not have. I mean, they just don't. And what is that all about? Trying to put those stipulations out there because maybe you got that, but everybody doesn't have that.
Yeah. So now that part of the conversation is where they try to distract the focus from the fact that they are xenophobes and that their real goal is to troll and to be anti-immigrant. But I have a show called Vibrate Higher TV that I'm about to roll out the second season for. And the first guest is my brother, Derek Hamilton. Derek Hamilton is an economist who has done work with Sandy Darity. Sandy Darity is sort of the intellectual arm of ADOS. And I don't like Sandy Darity. And Derek Hamilton is a very gracious, respectful brother. He won't talk smack about Sandy Darity, but he has let me know that he doesn't agree with his recent movements, right? So Derek Hamilton, when it comes to who should get reparations, when it comes to, you know, What's the criteria? That's a conversation for scholars, for economists, for the people who really do the work. When anonymous Twitter accounts who are too scared to even show their own face start questioning people's lineage, what are we even talking about?
Right.
How are you an expert on this? Like, whether or not Black people who immigrated here after a certain year should be eligible for reparation, we can have the conversations about that. We can have the conversation about whether or not reparations should be a cash thing or whether or not it should be healthcare or education. I'm open to all those conversations. I might agree, I might not agree, but I'm open to dealing with the experts and figuring, and that's where we bring it back to whether or not the study is needed. This is why the study is needed. And I'm not talking about a study from the government. I'm talking about internal within the experts of the community. We do not know at this point, because it's not even a realistic thing yet. We do not know what a reparations package would look like. We don't know whether or not it should go to this group of immigrants, what is going to be the amount of melanin you have in your skin, like what it's going to be. We have to figure that out. And I would not sit here and say I'm the expert on that. I would not profess to be the expert on that. What I'm the expert on is, what I am the expert on is pointing out a grift. I am the expert on being like, nah, your organization is fraudulent.
Yeah. Are there any in the hip hop community or really just in the entertainment community that you collaborate with that have the same level of thinking or mindset that you have around social activism?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of them. I mean, one of the most prominent examples is Killer Mike, and I love my brother Killer Mike. Killer Mike was actually supportive of ADOS, and I don't want to, but I've had private conversations with him where I've shared some of my concerns. He absolutely did share my concern about the Reagan thing when I met, because Killer Mike has a record about Ronald Reagan. So when I said, they had Ronald Reagan on the website. He said, yeah, I had a problem with that too. I can't speak for the brother Killer Mike. I don't know if he still supports them. But Killer Mike is one of those people. Tef Poe, brother I met in Ferguson from St. Louis. Very good brother. Excuse me. My brother David Banner. My brother Jasiri X. Rhapsody. My sister Rhapsody. Vic Mensa is just a newer artist who is really on the front lines. No Name from Chicago is someone I've really been paying.
Yeah, I just came hip to her. Yeah,
like I like her energy a lot. Those are just the names that come, and then of course my OGs, people like Chuck D, who been very active as well.
Absolutely.
Ice Cube been very active as well.
Yeah, take a couple. Ice Cube been giving them the business lately. Let me take this phone call.
Ice Cube been going back to Black Korea Ice Cube.
Yeah, man. Good evening, caller. You're on.
Are we taking calls? Okay.
You're on, caller.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Thanks for having this conversation. It's very much needed. I just wanted to point out a comment that you made regarding the vote being an exchange and people talking about holding the Black vote hostage, which I don't personally think is a good thing. Because we do need to, look into our local elected officials and look into our federal officials and look to see who we can bring to the table. We need a seat at the table. And that's the only way I think we can actually move the dial forward. I was in the private sector and I now work for an elected official myself. And I see the work that we do day in and day out on the ground and how we're able to transfer that to our boss in Washington and how well. And thank you.
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't hear the last part.
You didn't hear the last part? Okay, just touch on the part that you did hear.
Yeah, I think that brother sounded practical. It goes back to what you were saying. I think that if you do the math, that you can make an argument for for voting progressive, voting Democrat. I think that's a fair argument to make. You spoke, brother Swan, about the lesser of two evils. If you're going to take just a moral stance like that, because that is a very moralistic stance, I can't hate on that either. I think there's validity to both arguments.
Absolutely. Good evening, caller. You're on.
How you doing, Bishop?
How y'all doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, my brothers. Hey, look, I want to say this one thing right here, okay? And I mean this with all the sincerity. First of all, Bishop, I appreciate you and what you have done and how you stood up. You remind me of, I didn't know Nat Turner, but I bet he was you.
All right.
All right. But listen, I'm going to tell you what I'm sick of hearing, okay? As a black man, I'm a former Marine too, by the way, okay? What I'm tired of hearing is other people's issues getting in front of ours. I don't want to hear nothing about no immigrants and nobody else until we get taken care of. I'm sick of us always looking out for somebody else. And meanwhile, we end up in the mud. There are brothers and sisters in this country that are being hoodwinked and that are being taken advantage of over water doggone bills. Water bills, taking people's houses over water bills. Okay? This is the kind of stuff that's happening to our people in this thing on country. And listen, I love my African brothers. I got on the plane, and sisters, I got on a plane in 2010 with no itinerary, $1,500 in my pocket, and got on the plane and went to Africa. I love the brothers and sisters over there. I was in South Africa, Mozambique. I love the brothers and sisters over there. But, okay, I love my people here as well because we are not them. We are unique. We are a unique people. Okay, we are unique people, and I want us and our needs and what they haven't given us. Reparations is for us. Those of us who are descendants of this terrible system and that is still in this terrible system. I want to hear about nobody else coming to the damn table.
All right,
we get taken care of because we always get crumbs.
Let me let our guest respond to you. Thank you for your call.
Yeah, I mean, the brother is obviously very angry. And I think as a black man in America, he has every right to be angry. And the anger is understandable. As far as his actual points, I couldn't disagree more with what he was saying. Obviously, black Americans have a unique justice claim. Obviously, we have a unique experience. But to say that immigrants have no power, especially black immigrants, have no power in this country. Immigrants are not our enemy. Immigrants are not stopping us from getting reparations. Immigrants do not have the power to stop us from getting reparations, even if they wanted to do that. It's power in numbers, and you can't say that you're pro-black, but you can't say I'm pro-black and here's my black agenda, but later for them Africans, I can't think about them now. We not like them. They black too. If you pro-black, you gotta be pro-black, bro. Don't tell me you pro-black and then you don't have no love for your African brothers, your Caribbean brothers, your brothers from wherever. So the idea, what happens is a brother like that gets weaponized because he has passion, he has anger. But I mean, with all due respect to any veterans watching, I'm not a fan of the military. To me, I see the military as the cops. Forgive my language, but F the police. That's how I roll. You know what I'm saying? So if you have been weaponized already to be a Marine for a country that hasn't given you reparations, you're not an activist, and you're not doing no social justice work. So there's already a divide with me there. There's veterans who do. There's a lot of people, because we're poor people. We come from poor communities. People go into the military just to get a job, just to get out the hood, just to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't hate on it, but if you go through that and you don't come back, like, nah, I got to work for my people. If you don't see how the American imperialism, American colonialism is using you as a tool to kill black and brown brothers. And just one last point.
Yeah.
The way that we get reparations, the way that we move the country more progressively, we are a minority in this country. The reason why they want to build the wall, the reason why they want to stop particularly black and brown immigrants from coming here, because they know that if more black and brown people come here, then the tide will shift. It's only math, brother. It's only common sense, power in numbers. there are black immigrants there are black immigrants that are way more pro-black than Candace Owens and Diamond and Silk. So we supposed to kick them out because the slave ship dropped them off someplace different than it dropped us off? I'm not saying black immigrants should get reparations that are due to black Americans. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't. That's not the idea that, okay, we have to now be against immigrants. I'm sorry, I cannot roll like that. That goes against Dr. King. That goes against Malcolm X. Malcolm X's mother was an immigrant from Trinidad. So are we going to diss Malcolm X's mother? Martin Luther King said he was for reparations. There's a video going around where he says time to cut the check, right?
Right.
But Martin Luther King also said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice
everywhere. And they use that as a divisive tactic when we have those kind of sentiments. Because at the end of the day, if you talk about what America has done to black people, we can't have so much loyalty to America that I'm an American descendant of slaves. So the hell with the Africans and the Caribbean,
what are we doing?
etc. You know, if you're pro-black, and I agree with you, if you're pro-black, then you're pro-black for all of our black brothers and sisters across the diaspora. And it cannot just be I'm down just for black people who were born in America.
That's exactly what your master wants you to do. Your master wants you to say, I'm red, white, and blue. I'm not from Africa. If you say that I'm not an African, then say goodbye to your reparations, bro. What do you deserve reparations for? You know what I'm saying? Like, you deserve reparations because you were snatched and dragged here from Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you say to a young up and coming artist who's out there trying to make inroads in the business, and at the same time trying to balance all of this madness that they see happening across the country, across the nation, and how do they take the passion of the moment, put it in their music or their craft, whatever that is, and make it something positive for the people?
Well, the beautiful thing is that the music industry has crumbled, and so there's no formulas that work. And so I could learn more from a new younger artist when it comes to your particular question than they could learn from me. It's my job as the OG to step back and follow the lead of the young people. And if they ask for advice, I'll give them advice. But it's time for the young people to stand up. I have two children who are in their early 20s, and they are very good musicians. And they play me their music, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know how you arrived at that decision to pick that beat, but because I'm old, like, I'm not supposed to get it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't really have a lot of advice for the younger people. My advice is more for people my age. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Caller, you're the last caller. You're on the air.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Oh, okay. All right. I just want to say I really appreciate. Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I just want to say I really appreciate this conversation that you guys are having tonight. It's a very important conversation, and it just breaks my heart to see the divide between our African American brothers and sisters and Black immigrants. I don't understand it. I don't even know where it's coming from. You know, how did this happen? How did we get to this point? And this is a conversation that we need to have. We need to understand that African Americans are only 13% of this population in the United States. Like, the whites are the majority, you know. And then the Black immigrants are probably like 10%, less than 10% of the African American population. How are they the problem?
That's right.
How did they now become this problem? When has a Black immigrant come forward to say, no, we don't want X, Y, and Z for our African American brothers and sisters? Like, we don't want them to have rights. How did they become the problem? I don't understand that.
All right. Thank you for your call, and we'll try to answer the question. Now, what I see, brother, is this. is in as much as we heard that other brother, passionately talk about he don't want to hear anything about immigrants, so on and so forth. There are a number of immigrants who are anti-Black American. There are a number of them who will tell you quickly, I'm not, who will deny being Black. I'm not Black. What they mean is I'm not Black American. There are many of my African brothers who have been so indoctrinated by white supremacist religion, and I mean the amazing number of them that are supporters of Trump. They can't even vote for him, and who are anti-Black American, and so that sentiment among Black immigrants is also being weaponized by white supremacy.
I would push back a little bit on that. I would push back on the idea that it's many, and the idea that there's an amazing number. Of course, I grew up in New York City. I grew up in a community where African Americans were the minority population. On my block where I grew up, we were the only African American family. There's Jamaican families, Trinidadian families, African families, and absolutely as a child I've absolutely seen anti-American, anti-Black American sentiment from Black immigrant communities. Have I seen much of it? No, I've seen it, but it's not an amazing number. It's not many. And as many times as I've seen that, I've also seen Black Americans be anti-African, anti-Caribbean. If I'm not going to judge a community by the worst elements of that community. I'm not going to say just because, like the people I see ADOS people complain about the word Akata. Let me tell you something, brother. I've been all over the world. I've been to Africa many times, Europe, Asia, everywhere. I grew up in New York City, been around Africans. I ain't never been called no Akata. Only time I seen the word Akata used was in the movie Sugar Hill. If you go online and follow some of these ADOS accounts, you believe that you believe that we have a Nigerian president who's calling people Akata every day. And I think the weaponization is the elevation of that conversation. That's not a real, are there, for lack of a better word, are there Black immigrants who would be cooning? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it more of them that be cooning than Black Americans to be cooning? Not at all. Not at all. No. For every Black immigrant or Black African that says Black, every Caribbean people that says Black Americans are lazy, Black Americans are thug, whatever, I could find 3 Candace Owens. I promise you that. You know what I'm saying? So what are we even talking about? Are we talking about the worst of the worst? Okay, well, let's forget about them people. Let's focus on the people. Let's focus on the Marcus Garveys who come from Jamaica. Let's focus on the Malcolm X whose mother was an immigrant. Let's focus on those examples. And to the sister's point, the sister who just called, that's the hokey pokey right there. That's the whole thing. What did she say? She said, I don't understand where it's coming from. Well, I do understand where it's coming from. It doesn't make sense because it's not supposed to make sense. It's coming from John Tanton, who passed away last year, but his organization. It's coming from very insidious right-wing organizations who understand that our communities have been traumatized, who understand that our communities have been in pain, who understand that our communities have been going at each other's necks and say, here's a way that we can split the Black vote. When you start to defend the anti-immigration argument by saying, well, there are some people who do, it starts to overlap with the MAGA people. And if you're not careful, if you don't have the, and I know that's not what you're doing because I know you're too smart to do that. But people who are like the brother, I'm not going to say the Marine brother was not smart, but he's clearly been watching some YouTube videos. He's clearly been watching videos from ADOS or one of these organizations that have been feeding him this idea that there's this. I'm telling you, and I go back to my privilege. It's because I grew up in New York City and I've traveled the world. I understand that my experience as a Black American in New York is different in many ways from a Black person who grew up in the South or a Black person who grew up in the Midwest. And the way that they see immigration, too often for my taste, overlaps with how white supremacy or immigration. I have family and friends who think like that. Brother Claude Anderson is a good example. I have an immense amount of respect for Brother Claude Anderson. When I worked at Kiru Books, and I still own Kiru Books, I used to sell a lot of copies of a book, Black Labor, White Wealth. I love this book, but I do not agree with Brother Claude Anderson on his take on immigration. I do not agree with him at all. But the reason why you don't see me coming out like Claude Anderson is trash and all these things I'm saying about ADOS is because Claude Anderson ain't online trolling people with no personal attacks.
Right.
We just have a philosophical disagreement about how to handle the immigration situation.
And that's fine. We can do that. But at the end of the day, we've got to be conscious, even more so now, that we live in a global community. And I think people have to understand that. And how Black people are treated anywhere in this world has a direct influence on how we're treated everywhere.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely. So what do you got going on now? What's your latest project? I love the People's Party, man. You always have some good guests on there, some great interviews that are happening on there. What's happening in Talib's world right now?
I'm in Yellow Springs, Ohio. Right now, Dave Chappelle is on stage in a cornfield. And Donnell Rollins is out here. Michelle Wolf is out here. So when I get off the line with you, I'm going to go link up with Dem. I'm out here filming the People's Party thing from here. Me and Dave working on some things. I'm working on a new Black Star album with Mos Def and Madlib. And me and Diamond D, legendary hip-hop producer, we got an album coming out. I'm about to start a Patreon page. I've been on Twitter heavy for 10 years. I'm about to direct all that traffic to my Patreon page because Patreon, you have to have a membership. If I'm going to be engaging with people to the amount I engage, now I'm about to make it like, okay, now you got to pay. And if you got to pay, it'll probably be a lot less trolls. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Brother, I want to thank you for coming on with me tonight, man. I think it's long overdue. Glad to have a conversation with you. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Keep inspiring the people out there, and we support you, man.
And I appreciate you so much, brother. And the brother who was a Marine, even though I disagreed with him, his political stance completely, what he said about you is completely accurate, brother. And I don't think you get your flowers enough. And this is what I like about you, because I'm very critical of religion, and I'm very critical of people who participate in the religious space, because it can be co-opted for evil so often. And you, brother, are a shining example, in my estimation, of what true Christianity can and should be, because you approach it from a place of revolutionary love. You're not weak, you stand your ground, and I appreciate you.
All right, man. Peace to you, man. Best of luck to you and everything you're doing.
Thank you, brother.
Say his name.
Freddie Gray, say his name. Freddie Gray, say his name. Freddie Gray, say his name. Freddie Gray, won't you say his name? Ayanna Jones, say her name. Jones, say her name. Ayanna Jones, say her name. Ayanna Jones, won't you say her name? Sandra Bland, say her name. Sandra Bland, say her name. Sandra Bland, say her name. Sandra Bland, won't you say her name? Say her name. 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 Won't you say her name?
Kimani Gray, say his name. Kimani Gray, say his name. Kimani Gray, say his name. Kimani Gray, won't you say his name? John Crawford, say his name. John Crawford, say his name. John Crawford, say his name. John Crawford, won't you say his name? Michael Brown, say his name. Michael Brown,